The other thing I wanted to say has to do with my shirt. So I've had people ask me, what is this shirt and what does it mean? When I got arrested, this was my number well, not yet. Other people ask me if this is the salary that I'd like to have. Well, probably not possible. This is more than the whole budget of the church, so that's not going to happen. So Ken Vagoda nailed it right off the top of the morning. He saw the shirt and he's like, "Oh, you going to sing that song?" So that's a big clue. Anybody else other than my daughter Lakin, who obviously knows, which I'll tell you. Anybody know? Rent. Very good. Yeah. So this is probably the best known song from the musical Rent, which is, Lake, was this the 20th anniversary of the show? Yeah. So 20 years ago, this swept the Tonys on Broadway. And it was a very forward-thinking kind of a show for really two reasons. One, the music, the genre that it was kind of a pop rock, and great music, as you would guess, but very rock and roll-ish, which was cool and well done. It has kind of a very 80s vibe, actually more than a 90s vibe, I think. But then also, it was the first show to help its viewers, help the audience, immerse themselves in a world that was torn apart by HIV/AIDS and everything revolving around that. And so one of the central characters or central storylines in this multi-storyline musical is a story of two gay men who fall in love and have a deep, abiding love, but they're both HIV positive, and one, I don't want to spoil anything, but one, in the course of the show, loses their battle. And the beautiful thing about it is, if you're just there as an audience member and you're entering into the story, the labels fade away right away. And there are lots of labels for different characters in the show. The labels fade away and you find yourself choked up because you see one person who simply lost the love of their life. And you're broken about it. So this number refers to a primary line in the song Seasons of Love, which opens the second act. 525,600 minutes. That's all I know. And that's and really what it refers to is, what are you going to do with the time that you have? Because this is how many minutes you have in a year, every year. What are you going to do with that? Are you going to waste it away with being a fool in all kinds of different ways? Or what the song suggests is, why don't you sow that? Why don't you invest that in love and all of its myriad forms? And especially with the backdrop in the musical of an amazing person dying, it just makes this all the more important. And that's what we are as Crosswalkers. That's what Everybody Always in this series is all about. And we happen to be at the very last day of Pride Month, and that's a big deal. And we have some banners out in the front that kind of give a hint about where we're at with these kinds of things. So I want to introduce our guest today. And Coach Bailie, as she likes to be called, gave me this, and I'll tell you a little about how we first met. So Bailie is a proud member of the LGBTQ community who is passionate about making Napa County a healthier, safer place for all people. She is a fierce advocate for survivors of domestic violence and sexual abuse and works as a program manager for News Sexual Assault Victim Services Department. In fact, she just recently got promoted to that, which is awesome. She is also a founding member of the Napa County Suicide Prevention Council. Bailey's community service and advocacy work addresses two issues, violence and suicide, both of which disproportionately affect members of the LGBTQ community. She believes that activism, outreach, and education are powerful tools for social change, and she is committed to making positive changes in our community that help our residents thrive. I first met Coach Bailie. Well, actually I didn't meet her. I kind of saw her from across the table at a CAPC, Child Abuse Prevention Council meeting. She probably doesn't remember this at all because she was just there to talk about this new initiative that she was going to be engaged in, and she'll talk more about that toward the end of our thing, about entering into the sports world in Napa, particularly working with coaches so they could work with their teams to think through how they can coach their players, mostly boys and becoming men, about how to be kind and how to be respectful, so that it would bring down violence on every level. Leave the violence for the football field, kind of a thing. And so it sounded like an amazing thing that news was about, and she struck me as an amazing person then. And then I think the next time I popped into her was at a Resilient Napa conference just this past, whatever that was. I don't remember when that was. Stephen, you would know that. And we happened to end up at the same table together. And we were talking about some of the dynamics we were talking that we were engaged with in the whole conference, which was broad in focus. And I could tell that Bailie was holding back just a little bit. And so I pushed her just a little bit and opened the floodgates, and we got a real picture of the passion that Bailie brings to her work, which was really awesome and incredibly articulate. And I think I did see you on the college campus one time when you were doing your work. And then the next time I ran into her, I was going to what I thought was going to be a Raise the Flag event at City Hall, and it turned into be a session where we were supposed to give speeches. And I found out that I was dressed like a slob to give a speech to the city council. So I did my best, but Bailie was there ready and just was a rock star. And as soon as I heard her speak, I was like, man, I wonder if she'd be willing to come talk to Crosswalk this summer, because I knew I was going to be doing this series. And then she kind of became a rock star on all over Napa Valley, talking about this issue of equity and equality, particularly with LGBTQ stuff. So anyway, very excited to have Coach Bailie. Please welcome her up. One more hug.
Yeah.
All right. So
You.
glad to have
Hi,
you.
everybody. Oh, there's a mic. Although my voice does carry.
Is it working?
If not, I can just...
Oh, no, we're making you mic'd. All right. That should be on.
Am I on?
We're working on it.
Okay. Hello.
All right.
Hello.
Very good. Have a seat.
Thank you so much for having me.
I have water here for you if you need
Awesome.
it. It's
Yeah.
good to stay hydrated.
I might need that.
You're an athlete, I know, so we need to do that. Most
Stay hydrated.
importantly, where were you when USA beat France?
I was at work,
Oh,
and
working.
I missed the whole thing. I haven't even seen the highlights yet. Actually,
Oh, come on.
I know it's been pretty busy.
I think we're going to revoke the coach. From
Sorry,
your,
yeah,
nickname
I know.
there. I don't know if that's cool.
I'm really happy about it, but yeah, I was doing what I do on a daily basis at news, and just
Right on. Cool.
coming off of an awesome conference, and then my partner and I actually just purchased a house. So
Oh, yeah,
that's been
Kara May. Everybody
Kara
say,
May is
hey,
my
Kara
partner,
May. Very good to see you. Yeah.
locally known.
Right.
So I just want to say it's really awesome to be here and sitting in that chair through the meditation, and I got this like a God shot where I was realizing like, okay, this is where I'm supposed to be, which was interesting because it's Gay Pride Sunday, and I would normally be out celebrating and doing what I used to do a lot of when I lived in San Francisco, but to be here in this setting, it's quite different. Not really the first place I'd find myself on a Sunday,
No.
but I'm happy to be here, and just thank you so much for everyone for being so welcoming and having me here today.
Well, and I really thank you, because I know that this weekend in particular and the parades that are happening today in particular are pretty monumental.
Very
And
historic, very
yeah,
historic
so
weekend, yes.
knowing that, I really appreciate you taking time to be with us. We'll get to the historicity on that in a little bit, but first just clue us into you. Tell us your full life story.
Okay, the full life story. That's a long one. So I've been in Napa for 12 years. I grew up in Southern California in a little town called, a suburb called Bellflower, which is outside of Long Beach, in between Long Beach and Los Angeles. Went to college there and then transferred to UC Santa Cruz, got a degree in women's studies with a minor in LGBTQ studies, and then decided that I wanted to not pursue anything further in academia and decided to become a chef. So I went to culinary school and wound up in San Francisco, and that's how I wound up in San Francisco in my 20s, having fun and living it up. And moved up to Napa actually to open, anyone here remember the restaurant Ubuntu? It was an all vegetable restaurant.
Mm-hmm.
So I was one of the opening chefs at Ubuntu. That brought me to the Valley, and from there I wound up transferring on, or not transferring, but I moved on to the Fatted Calf, which is a butcher shop. People might know the Fatted Calf. I managed that place for 9 years, was a top, I had like my 15 minutes of fame as one of the top female butchers. in the country, which is kind of cool.
Wow.
And I've taught hundreds of women how to, like, from women home cooks, chefs, just farmers who wanted to learn, increase their butchery skills. And being a woman in that, you know, when I was going to culinary school and trying to break into the industry, there weren't many women doing that. So I made a real, you know, promise to myself to use my degree in women's studies and do something for the cause and educate women on how to butcher and be a force within their kitchens. So I was able to accomplish that.
Yeah.
And then got completely burnt out on the industry. Had a short career as an amateur athlete, and I won some triathlons. In the height of my
kidding.
career, I won 5 triathlons in 2 years, which was
Just
pretty
5?
cool. Just 5.
Good grief.
So that was pretty cool.
Wow.
And that led me to stand-up paddleboarding, my own business, personal training and athletics, and really just connecting with the sporting community. That allowed me to really take time for myself and figure out who I wanted to be and what I wanted to do. And I realized that I really wanted to do more meaningful work in the community that I lived. So I saw a Facebook ad for the volunteer training for news, domestic violence, and sexual abuse services to be a volunteer advocate as someone who responds to incidences when people are having situations of violence, and went through the program and realized that it brought up some of my past and some experiences that I've been through as a youth and a young adult, and the process of helping other people really helped me heal myself. So I continued doing that, and then eventually my resume wound up across Tracy Lamb's desk, and she saw that I was very avid in sports, and that I was an awesome volunteer. And she offered me a job to create a prevention program within the realm of sports in Napa County. So that's what I've been doing for the last year. Actually, tomorrow will be my 1-year anniversary in this role. So I'm really excited about that.
Right on. Cool. Yeah, sweet.
Yeah.
And so you moved to Napa, and just tell us a little about your experience.
Yeah, so moved to Napa. So I was living in the Castro when I lived in San Francisco and having a lot of fun. And I am a very loving, trustworthy, I feel like everybody has, you know, their best interest in humanity in mind. And I was living on 3rd and Franklin, right across the street at those apartments, right across the street from Community Projects. And I was so excited to just be in Napa, like this new restaurant, this new opportunities. I'm leaving my crazy chef life behind in San Francisco. And I'm you know, getting ready to go to Community Projects, and I'm in the crosswalk, walking the street, and a big white truck blows through the crosswalk, almost hits me, and 2 guys yell "faggot" out the window. And I was so stunned. I literally looked behind me to see who they were talking to, and then I realized that the only person that was standing there was me. And that was my first time really experiencing something very violently homophobic. I've been fortunate enough to you know, put myself in communities where I was embraced, and I didn't feel like I was going to be judged. You know, I was pretty much accepted and welcomed, you know, living in San Francisco. And when I was growing up down in Southern California, even though my community was pretty conservative, I spent a lot of time in Long Beach and Belmont Shore, and that's kind of where I grew up and found myself and came out and was able to really figure out who I was.
Yeah.
So coming to Napa, I had all these expectations of, like, I'm in the country, this is great, I'm retiring at 27 up here, and then that happened. And it was, you know, it was the first time I really felt not safe and not comfortable, and really couldn't see myself reflected in the community around me. And I really had to kind of question, like, okay, I've made this commitment to open this restaurant and to start this new life and be here, and can I really be safe here? Like, where am I actually living? So I was fortunate enough to connect with some amazing people in our community. LGBTQ Connection was like in its infancy at the time, but I met Ian and slowly started just meeting more and more people in the LGBTQ community in Napa, and have not experienced anything like that since.
That's good.
Yeah, but I'm only speaking for myself. I can't really speak for other people.
Yeah. I want to get into the weeds a little bit more with LGBTQ stuff, because part of the Everybody Always series is really to live up to what it says, that's what we're about, that God is for and with everybody always, without criticism. It's just, that's who God is. And part of the reality that I've learned, at least in my own journey, is we don't always know who's in the everybody. There are pockets of our community that make up our everybody that we don't know and we cannot fully understand because maybe we are part of the community that makes up more of a majority, and so our eyes don't even know how to see things in a way that an entire people group within our everybody community is seeing. And so part of my hope today is to just be an experience, an exercise for us of seeing, broadening our vision in ways that maybe we weren't clued into. I read a book last January called White Fragility, which has to do with how our eyes in the United States are racially formed. It's nothing we chose, nothing we woke up one day and says, I'm choosing this today. It's just part of our culture. And so I think in very much related ways, the same is true with this issue, that we have a community that is part of everybody. It's not an us and them, it's we, but it's a part of us that maybe we don't understand fully. And one of the things that or can appreciate a worldview, a different approach to life, everything, because I think a lot is involved here more than I know and more than a lot of people know. And so that gets me to one of the things that you mentioned in your bio, and I know Jenny Olson has said some things about this with her work on Teens Connect, that it seems like the rates for suicide and other really challenging issues are higher among the LGBT community.
They are. A recent study just came out of youth across the country. 1 in 5 youth that identify as LGBTQ have considered suicide, and the statistics for Napa County, according to the California Healthy Kids Survey, is 45% of LGBTQ identified high schoolers in Napa have considered suicide, and those are really high statistics. And I can't speak to like what causes it. I mean, I have my reason. I can make some. What am I trying to say here? Speculation. There we go. There's my public information officer there putting words in my mouth. Speculate. It's and I could also just speak to my personal experience of being young and in the closet and not really feeling like I could be myself and that people understood me. When we live in spaces where people don't see you, they don't recognize your who you are. They don't. They can bring judgments and criticisms, and it's kind of complex. I mean, in terms of I don't come from a very religious family. My grandma was, my parents were. However, I never felt like in spaces like this where I was welcome or comfortable. So children growing up in spaces like that where they have these expectations they can't be a certain way, then shut down. And for myself personally, the way that I dealt with that was through drugs and alcohol. I started drinking at a really, really young age. I didn't come out until I was 18 years old, and I actually didn't come out. My mom outed me because she was fed up of me like skirting around the issue. And when she finally outed me, they were very open, and they told me that they had known forever, but I needed to figure it out on my own. But after this first experience I had in middle school, where actually I had an intimate situation with a girl, and I enjoyed it. I went right into the closet for 9 more years after that, and it was really painful. I was trying to be a person that I wasn't, living in a community that I knew who, if people my age were queer, they were beat up, they were bullied, they did not have a very positive high school experience, and I could kind of say that for myself. And so for me, what I did was I really hid who I was, tried to be something I wasn't, and I was slowly destroying myself with drugs and alcohol in the process. Suicide is a solution for people who don't feel like they can talk to adults that they trust, and for me that was an option. I have a history of suicide for myself, tied to some other things, but this is also plays a big part in it as well. So I mean, I can't speak for every youth in Napa who is considering this, but for myself, I mean, if their experiences are similar to mine or even different than mine or worse, they're struggling. And considering, killing themselves,
Right.
which is a final solution to a temporary problem. And really studies show that if there's just one person who is accepting and loving and tolerant and willing to talk and hear out someone who is struggling, that will save a life. And
Yeah.
chances are you can either connect that person who is struggling with resources or just giving someone to talk to, a person
Yeah.
to go to. I was fortunate enough to have that person in my life. I had a freshman English teacher who saw me and was not going to let me destroy myself, even though I was trying really, really, really hard to do that because I had a lot of shame, a lot of guilt, a lot of pain, and a lot of non-acceptance from the people around me.
Yeah.
So, sorry to be a bummer.
No, it's reality. Well, and
Just
I mean,
tell it like it is.
that's what we do.
Yeah.
And you know, your speculation, I mean, that's my guess, that's my hunch too, is that the despair is related to that sense of isolation, the shame, it's all that stuff. And our culture, when I taught the last time about this subject a few years ago, you know, one of the things that I started with remarking about is we're able to have this conversation now. And so that's relatively new, and that's a really good thing, because we can be, well, good grief, in a church especially, it's even more rare, but to be able to have open conversations about the dynamics and what do we need to look at and work on and all that, which leads us to the flag.
Yeah, I was going to say, this is good segue into the flag, so why that flag matters.
Yeah.
The rainbow symbol, and I'll give you a little personal story. So I was 17 in high school, and I knew who I was. I just didn't know who to talk to about it, and I had a friend that kind of knew what was going on. And I had his name was Dan Minton. He was my junior English teacher, and he had a little rainbow sticker on a frame on his desk. It was just something little like that, and I knew that as a symbol of acceptance and, well, a symbol of, okay, at that time it was like you used to, you know, wear these things to let other people know who you were because you were queer. But for me it was like, okay, seeing this symbol is like, all right, this person knows what that means and this person understands, so this person would probably understand me and this is a safe space for me, and that's what I took it as. And that's pretty much what it really stands for. It's a symbol of, well, in its essence, Gilbert Baker was commissioned to create the Pride flag after Harvey Milk needed a symbol for the Pride Parade in the 1979 San Francisco Gay Pride Parade. And he wanted a symbol that stood for hope, that gave people who looked at it hope. And Gilbert Baker came up with the rainbow. Literally what the rainbow translates to, or what the colors translate to, so the red translates to, I'm going to see if I get this here. Floyd, you might want to help me out. So red is life, orange is healing, yellow is sunlight, green is nature, blue is serenity, and purple is spirit. There we go. So that's literally what
Cool.
what it stands for.
Huh.
So there's a lot of, I've read some things in the paper of people saying it stands for something else. Really it represents the diversity within the LGBTQ community because we are a very diverse group. And in the last few years they've actually added a couple colors of brown and black to include individuals of color, as well as the light, the fuchsia and the purple magenta color for our transgender brothers and sisters and everybody in between.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
I'm
it's
really-
about inclusion, diversity, and
Yeah.
really it's a symbol of hope. So
Uh-huh.
people coming to Napa and seeing that understand that this is a safe place to go. Flying that flag in our schools tells our students that we see them, we understand them, and they are okay.
Yeah.
Whether or not that might be completely true on a lot of levels,
Yeah.
seemingly it is. And that's why there was this huge effort to really, make this a thing. There was it was actually started by a group of moms who are connected to the First Five Network. And there used to be a really tight community of LGBTQ parents. And that kind of disbanded, and they needed something else. So it was kind of like finding that community and safe space paired with this realization now that 45% of our high schoolers are struggling with issues. It presented a great opportunity for us to really make this an issue and bring it to the community, and get our city government and our county government and our school district to acknowledge that this is really important and that we do care.
So let me back up just a little bit and have you respond to this. And a lot of this, I'm asking her with permission on a lot of the levels of questions that we're dealing with. So don't think this is like, I just came to church today, man. What are you doing? That's not what's happening here.
Yeah.
But had a conversation recently with a friend that, frankly, was uncomfortable, I think is a safe way to put it, about our banners out front. Because with Everybody Always, even though it's a rainbow-colored jacket on the Everybody Always book, they're thumbprints, that's what the image is, I chose, it was my choice, to use the pride flag as a backdrop for Everybody Always. And one of his responses, and everybody's in process here, so it's not a judgment thing here, but one of his responses simply was, well, I don't know if we need to be raising a banner for sexuality, for someone's sexuality. Leave that in the bedroom. So respond to that.
I see this as a teaching moment. It's not about sexuality. It's like I was saying before. It's about inclusion. It's about equity. It's about recognizing. It's about loving everybody.
Yeah.
It's not we're flying this flag because you're condoning me and my partner having sex. You are acknowledging the love that we have together between two people, and the love that people have for each other. And it reminds me, right now I'm having this image of this sign that was in my mom's house when I was growing up. It said, God is love. And I really didn't understand what that meant until probably 2 years ago, and most recently in the last year.
Yeah.
And really that's what this is all about. It's just love. And
right.
my dad likes to explain it, and he supports me. He doesn't really support me in me having children, but that's not in my plan for myself or us. But, he says it really just comes down to a person's relationship, their own personal relationship with God. And I kind of believe that that's the way that it should be. I don't really feel like someone should be telling me what I should or shouldn't be doing. I understand that there's verses in the Bible. I am not well schooled in that, so please don't quiz me on any of that stuff, because I'm going to. Okay, I am not. For a reason, just because I just don't really feel like it's necessary, and to be a human being and to connect with other people and love other people.
Yeah.
It's not about the symbols. It's not about all these things. It's about just it's the contact. It's these conversations that we're having. It's all of you inviting me to come here today and speak with you and learning about my life. Yeah. I mean, that's what it's about. It's not about going into my bedroom and I don't want you there.
Right.
I don't think people want to be there. I mean,
right.
I understand where this person might be coming from, and there was a letter to the editor that kind of sounded like that as well recently in the Register. It's about love, it's about inclusion, it's about understanding people, it's about finding tolerance, it's about respect, all those things. And there's also this the red, white, and blue should include everybody, and freedom and justice for all, and the colors of the rainbow. I'm sorry, not the rainbow, of the American flag. The red, white, and blue. I mean, there's valor and pride and hardness, and what's the other one? There's justice is what, so it's what this flag stands for. And when you look at it, it's a symbol of justice and freedom for all. Yeah. So the rainbow flag is kind of similar in that it has the colors that represent these great values and things, and also represents inclusion and tolerance and acceptance of everybody. And LGBTQ individuals are from every culture, every walk of life, every age. Yeah. So we're a very, very, very diverse group of people, much like everybody in the world. Yeah. I mean, really. That's
right.
Yeah. So
well, I got to tell you, for a person who doesn't have much of a formal faith upbringing, you sounded a whole lot like Jesus there in a lot of things you were saying. So good job with that.
All right.
That's good.
Well,
that's good marks.
I got to say, my grandma would be so happy that I am here today. She was probably the most religious one in the family. Was always trying to get us to go to church. And she's the one that really introduced prayer into my life when I was a little girl, and I didn't really, do it or understand it until recently. And I have an amazing God now and higher power who has blessed me with amazing things. So.
Yeah. Right on.
Yeah.
That's good.
I'm tight. Me and God are solid.
I'm very glad to hear that. That's awesome. One of the things I'm going to talk more about the depth and complexity of what you just touched on, American flag and pride flag, and what do we do with that. Next week I'll tackle that in a bigger, deeper way. But one of the things that compelled me to use the backdrop of the pride flag for the signage here what were the speeches that I heard at that city council meeting. And one of the people who shared, who was a little older than me, was talking about how she knows when she sees the flag in a store or organization or whatever, that as soon as she goes in, she can just breathe. Because she knows she doesn't have to be on defense, she doesn't have to explain, doesn't have to come out, it's just, she can just be. And again, this harkens back to white fragility and some of the concepts that are raised in that book by Robin DiAngelo, where she's talking about racial issues, but she says, we need flags, we need to raise attention on people groups that have been categorically oppressed. And until we recognize those and lift them up and say, you have been oppressed, we will be in denial about those things. And we'll keep on oppressing in subtle ways that we don't even know we're doing it. And culturally, we'll just keep on going, and especially in America, where we tell ourselves that we're the land of the free and everybody has equal justice, which is baloney, right? But we tell ourselves that. And so long as we don't raise the flag in different ways, we actually perpetuate injustice and inequity. And so hearing that is what kind of pushed me over the edge to say, well, we're already there as a church. And honestly, in my former way of thinking, and this may be just really not bright at all, which wouldn't be the first time, but it was like in my desire to have Crosswalk be a place of equality and equity. My thinking was, well, let's not celebrate any one group. That was my thinking. Let's just, because we have gay members here and gay leaders here, and that's not new to this church. So that was kind of my thinking. But then I just, again, this is my own ignorance and my own blindness, that I needed help to see things in a different way.
Can I kind of pick up on that just to kind of talk about oppression in its subtle ways in Napa? And this will speak to you meeting me at the table at the Resilience Conference and why I was really hesitant to open up. So it was October 2018, and our county was revising the strategic plan. It was the 2019-2022 strategic plan. And they called a meeting of the LGBTQ community and invited all of us to come and talk about what it's like to be gay in Napa and our experiences and our fears. And a lot of us showed up and we were vulnerable, and we spoke to a lot of concerns that we have. We spoke to a lot of issues that we have in terms of accessing healthcare, visibility in public spaces. A lot of things came up. We put our hearts and our hearts out there on the line and talked to our community leaders about these things. And then the strategic plan comes along, and there's no mention of LGBTQ in the entire plan.
Wow.
That's erasure, in my opinion. And for us to do that and to show up like other members of our community, they had ones for seniors, Latino. I mean, they pulled every demographic together, and you see a lot of them represented, but we were left out. And I'm not saying that we were intentionally left out because they have fears of doing it. It was just there was absolutely no mention of LGBTQ in the next strategic plan for Napa, and that really upset me, and I saw that is I feel like a form of oppression. If you're not counted, we will not be included in the census that's coming around. Sexual orientation and gender identity won't be added to the next census. So how can you receive services and get help and be recognized as people if you're not even counted as a person in your own community? So I feel like that's also why this is a very important issue, and why we really made an effort to make our city government and county government and school board and everybody else really see that, you know, we have jobs, we pay taxes, we buy homes in Napa, we contribute to this community, and feel like, you know, I feel like we should be represented and have the same, you know, things extended to us and just be counted. When people aren't counted, they don't get money, they don't get programs, they don't, I mean, you know, you can go down that rabbit hole if you want, but I really just wanted to speak to that because it does happen and it is happening. So I feel like this is going to bring about change in that realm. I'm hopeful, but time will tell.
Yeah, and I just recently was given a much greater clarity on the difference between equality and equity. That equality lets everybody in, but equity is a very different thing. Equity has to do with the same level of access to the same things, and not everybody has the same access, even though we may be technically equal.
And there's a lot of barriers to access for, I mean, just taking the LGBTQ out, people of color have access, have barriers to their access. And then you factor in the intersection of someone who happens to be black, who happens to be transgender, and then happens to be a woman. There's a lot of barriers to success in life if that is that's your identity.
So from your learning, if you want to slip into, you know, you just got certified in a really cool thing, and maybe these dovetail together, but how can we be better advocates for equality and equity in our desire to be in everybody always kind of a church when it comes down to the LGBTQ community, who's a part of everybody, and we, how can we be better agents of that or advocates for that?
That's a really good question.
Don't tell me I stumped you.
No, you didn't. You give me a lot of things to think about because there's a lot of answers to that. I mean, really, I think, you know, essentially what people can do at the very basis is be open and loving and accepting, and don't have fear of what's different, fear of the opposite, and cling to these ideas of, oh, this is the way that it's always been, change is bad. Like, no, get to know a person, have a conversation. And that's something that I have to do for myself, encountering individuals who maybe vote differently or have other opposing ideas. It's real easy, you know, to just snap to judgment and be really mean and harsh and critical and nasty on Facebook. But really, if you ask a person like why they believe what they believe and where they're coming from, it's an opportunity to learn, and it's an opportunity to make that connection and really understand where someone is coming from. And those connections, kind of like what you were saying, those moments that those opportunities you have that God puts you in, is a moment that could, you know, change your mind on something. The work that I do in the school, so I was just certified in a program called Coaching Boys into Men, and it's an evidence-based curriculum that engages boys and men, male athletes and coaches as agents for violence prevention and social change, teaching them about consent, boundaries, healthy relationships. And what we're trying to do is change sports culture to include violence prevention as an aspect of that. Sports can either be super positive, and in a lot of ways they're very, very positive. You know, kids from their young age all the way up to the college level, all the way up to spectators, people who watch sport, immersed in this culture, and it can bring positive values or it can bring negative values. There can be violence, aggression, intolerance, win at all cost, very homophobic locker rooms. I mean, there's you know, a lot of things, racism, all those things that can, you know, kind of play into that. So what we're trying to do is go in there and really talk to the coaches and give them the skills to have these conversations with their athletes around just being human and respectful and respecting women. Big slant on respecting women, but also it's just respecting other people too. And themselves. Awesome. And then we have a curriculum that we use with female athletes that's all about empowerment and giving women a voice and making our young girls and women realize that they matter and that they have a place in the world and that they can be great athletes, and then getting sporting organizations to recognize that so that they're treated differently, treated the same, they have similar opportunities, again, the equity piece of it as well, paid the same. I
Yeah.
mean, you know,
Right.
eventually, maybe one day, women will be equal, but we got a
And
ways to go, I
It's
think.
going to be a while, but we'll go for that. We'll go
So,
for that.
Yeah,
Well,
did that
cool.
answer your question?
It did. That was
Okay.
good stuff.
All right.
You know, some of the things I was thinking about, knowing that we're going to talk, I'm certain that 10 years ago, 15 years ago, you had no idea you could never imagine sitting on a stage at a church, you know, talking about this stuff, for sure, being a spokesperson for equity, equality, all that, I'm sure.
Yeah, 2009, I definitely was not thinking about this moment.
Right.
On today, 2009, yeah, absolutely not.
That's right.
No.
But that's how it works.
Mm-hmm.
And the stories that I told you about Isaiah, about Peter on the rooftop, about Philip, and any other significant leader, you know, in the Bible narrative, it always started like this, where they sensed they needed to do something, they started to do something, and almost invariably it hit the fan. Change is never anything but messy and slower than we'd like. And somebody has to be the one to say, well, I'm willing to step in and be a part of the mess for a while, because it's going to take a while. And by the way, the one that we claim to follow, Jesus, he was making messes everywhere. We have him so caricaturized as, you know, almost not touching the ground, walking around, and you can almost hear the, oh, you know, everywhere he goes. When in reality, he was breaking rules left and right. He was ticking off the religious environment left and right. That's why he got killed. And he would not be part of the way the world was going. And he offered a different model, which, interestingly, is a nonviolent one and is one of embrace and inclusion, not exclusion. So you're in a great path here. And I just want to first commend you, and then also to just remind you in a very hopeful, positive way that when you face messes, which you undoubtedly will, I face them too, that's a good sign. That's a good sign. And good on you for all that.
Thank you. Yeah, I like, I guess, being in messy places and trying to, you know, learn how to become a change maker. I feel like I have a voice. I used it a lot over the last month, speaking in public comments, just about sharing my personal story in the effort to get the flags raised.
Yeah.
And so I don't see any end to that in my future.
Awesome. I'm glad to hear that. Will you let me pray for you, and then we'll let you get out of here?
Yeah, of course.
All right. Can I put my hand on your shoulder? That's my
Sure.
normal,
Yeah,
my
okay.
professional blessing move here. It's right here. Would you pray with me? God, thank you for Coach Bailie, for who you've made her to be, helping her realize with supportive parents who she was created, and being with her all throughout the journey to the point where she discovered the truth of you, which is your love. And so I pray that your spirit of love will continue to infill her, to overwhelm her, to give her great support, that when she feels alone, she finds out she's not. When she feels she doesn't have the strength, she finds out there's more there than she thought she had, because it's you. Guide her steps, guide her mouth, guide her vision, because if she's about love, then she's about you. And so may your spirit guide her, keep her, continue, and great things to happen for her. We ask this in Jesus' name. Amen. Would you please rise and thank Coach Bailie for being here today? Thank you so much. That was awesome. You're a rock star. You're a rock star. Love you.
Thank you, everybody.
All right.